What would you do if you went to the hospital for an operation and returned home miraculously pregnant with no memory of how this could have occurred? This is the story of the pregnancy scandal that shook the very fabric of the prestigious Rosewood Hospital. Let me tell you how this heart-wrenching story began. In the heart of the city stood the prestigious Rosewood Hospital, a facility known for its medical excellence and achievements. Rosewood was the only hospital in the country that had never recorded a death in its 15 years of existence. To the people, Rosewood wasn't just a hospital, it was a place where miracles seemed to happen. The hospital's reputation had drawn patients from far and wide, and its staff was regarded as some of the finest medical professionals in the country. Among its doctors was Dr. Kalu, a man known not only for his skill but for his reputation as a ladies' man. His charm was undeniable, and many could attest to his flirtatious lifestyle. He was well liked, yet many worried about his behavior around women. However, something far more sinister than mere flirtation was about to shake the very foundation of the hospital. Over the course of the year, several female patients reported strange occurrences to the management of the hospital. Women who had come to the hospital for minor treatments or surgeries returned to say that they were pregnant. "We were not pregnant before we came to the hospital. How can we now be pregnant after spending days in your hospital?" They queried the management, who could not explain how this was happening. Among the women affected was Mrs. Amara Okoye, the wife of General Okoye, a high-ranking officer in the Nigerian army. Amara had come to Rosewood for a routine surgery. She was discharged from the hospital after her surgery and began to have strange feelings that troubled her mind. She paid a visit to her personal doctor, who delivered the shocking news to her that she was pregnant. Amara could not believe her ears. "That's impossible," she said to the doctor, who carried out a second test that confirmed to her that she was pregnant. Stunned and confused, Amara insisted that there was no possible way that she could be with child. Her husband, General Okoye, had been sterile for years, a secret known only to the two of them. When she told him about the pregnancy, the general flew into a rage. He accused her of having an affair, his fury knowing no bounds. He stormed out of their home, leaving her in tears. Amara could not understand how this had happened. Little did she know that her situation was not unique. Soon, news of the other women, who were all former patients of Rosewood Hospital, began to emerge, revealing how they miraculously got pregnant at Rosewood. As more women came forward with similar stories, the hospital found itself under intense scrutiny. Dr. Kalu's name came up time and time again in the conversations. He had been the attending doctor for several of the affected women, and his reputation for flirting with women only fueled the fire of suspicion. Dr. Kalu had always been a figure of fascination in the hospital. Known for his charm and good looks, he had a reputation of being flirtatious with the nurses, and rumors about his promiscuity were nothing new in the hospital, but they had always been dismissed as harmless gossip. However, as the strange pregnancies mounted, suspicions naturally turned to Dr. Kalu. He had access to most of the patients, and with his reputation, it wasn't hard to connect the dots. Several nurses recalled his advances, some laughing them off, whilst others felt uncomfortable with his attention, but with no solid evidence. No one had ever filed a formal complaint against him. Now, as the investigation deepened, Dr. Kalu's name kept resurfacing, and it wasn't long before the administration began to focus on him. The hospital administration quickly launched an internal investigation, but the damage to Dr. Kalu's reputation had already begun. The nurses, who had previously been silent about Dr. Kalu, began sharing their stories. He always seemed to have a way of getting too close. One nurse said he'd make jokes, but sometimes They didn't feel like jokes. Another nurse mentioned that he had once tried to touch and kiss her whilst they were on shift. As more nurses came forward, the accusations against him became more damning. General Okoye was not a man to let things slide. He had served the country with honor, building a career that commanded respect. The idea that his wife had been violated in some way under his nose filled him with rage, and as more reports of the other women's pregnancies surfaced, the general vowed to get to the bottom of it. He used his influence to pressure the hospital's board, insisting that someone had to pay for the shame brought upon his family. Dr. Kalu's name reached his ears, and soon the general had his prime suspect. Dr. Kalu's reputation for flirtation and proximity to the female patients made him a convenient target. The general began a personal crusade to ruin the man he believed had wronged him. General Okoye was a man who possessed considerable power, and as the news of his wife's pregnancy spread, his anger turned into a burning desire for revenge. Using his influence, the general orchestrated a smear campaign against Dr. Kalu. The media got wind of the scandal, and soon Dr. Kalu's face was plastered across newspapers and television screens. The headlines were damning: Doctor or Predator, the man behind Rosewood's rape scandal. Dr. Kalu could feel the tension mounting around him. Nurses avoided eye contact, and patients requested to be treated by other doctors. The rumors swirling around the hospital became impossible to ignore. He had never imagined that his harmless flirtations could lead to such severe accusations. "I didn't do this," he told anyone who would listen, but his protests fell on deaf ears. The hospital administration called him in for questioning. They grilled him about his behavior, the time he spent with the patients, and the relationship he had with staff. Every moment he had ever flirted or made a passing comment now seemed suspicious. Dr. Kalu found himself cornered, but he continued to deny any involvement in the pregnancies. "This is absurd," he muttered to himself as he left the boardroom, but deep down, he knew things were spiraling out of control. Amidst the chaos, one of the nurses, Tola, came forward with a confession. She admitted that Dr. Kalu had made advances towards her several times.
He was always very forward.
She said, her voice trembling.
He'd make inappropriate comments and try to get too close.
Her admission sent shockwaves through the hospital. Tola's statement seemed to confirm what everyone had feared. The administration suspended Dr. Kalu pending further investigation, and he was placed on leave. His colleagues distanced themselves from him, and the media quickly caught wind of the story. The headlines painted him as a predator, promiscuous doctor accused in hospital pregnancy scandal. The evidence against him was circumstantial, but in the court of public opinion, he was already guilty. General Okoye wasted no time in using his power to ruin Dr. Kalu. He publicly demanded justice, appearing on television interviews where he described the deep betrayal his family had endured. The general's influence ensured that Dr. Kalu's life became a living nightmare. Reporters camped outside his home, and his family cut ties with him to avoid the shame. The general's rage blinded him to anything else. He didn't care about Dr. Kalu's pleas of innocence. In his mind, the doctor was responsible, and nothing could convince him otherwise. General Okoye even pulled strings to have Dr. Kalu's medical license revoked, leaving him jobless and ostracized. There was no corner of the city where Dr. Kalu could escape the growing rot. As Dr. Kalu's world crumbled, he reached out to anyone who might listen to his side of the story. He hired a lawyer and publicly declared his innocence, but the damage had already been done. His face was plastered all over the news, and even though no solid evidence had been found, the public had made up their minds. Dr. Kalu struggled to understand how everything had gone so wrong. He knew he had flirted, but he was certain he had done nothing that crossed the line. Still, the doubt began to creep in. Could something have happened that he wasn't aware of? Were his memories clouded by years of reckless behavior? Despite his lawyer's encouragement, Dr. Kalu began to lose hope. The walls were closing in. Behind the scenes, not everyone was convinced that Dr. Kalu was guilty. A small group of nurses, led by Nurse Amina, started asking questions. They had worked alongside him for years, and whilst acknowledging his flirtatious nature, they didn't believe he was capable of something so horrific. It doesn't add up, Amina said to her colleagues one evening. Something else is going on here. The more they investigated, the more inconsistencies they found. Some of the affected patients had never even been in contact with Dr. Kalu during their stay. Yet, their pregnancies were all linked to the same time frame. The nurses decided to dig deeper, determined to uncover the truth. What they found would lead them down a dark and unexpected path. As the nurses delved into hospital records, they discovered something alarming. Several patients' files were missing. The records of the women who had mysteriously fallen pregnant had been altered or erased entirely. This was no coincidence. Someone had gone to great lengths to cover their tracks, but who? Nurse Amina grew more suspicious. She reported the missing files to the hospital administration, but they were too focused on Dr. Kalu's case to pay much attention. We've already got our suspect, they told her dismissively. Frustrated but undeterred, Amina and her group continued their unofficial investigation, determined to find out who was behind the missing records. Back at home, General Okoye was beginning to have second thoughts. His wife Amara had grown distant and withdrawn, unable to forgive him for doubting her faithfulness. Though he had thrown himself into destroying Dr. Kalu, a small voice in the back of his mind kept asking, what if I'm wrong? The general was not a man used to questioning himself, but something about the situation didn't feel right. Amara too was plagued with doubts. She hadn't seen Dr. Kalu much during her hospital stay, and the timing of the pregnancies seemed too bizarre to be coincidental. She wanted to believe her husband's theory, but deep down, she couldn't shake the feeling that something much darker was at play. The nurses' unofficial investigation took a dark turn when one of them, Nurse Chika, discovered that many of the altered records were tied to night shifts. These shifts were staffed by a skeleton crew, and most of the senior doctors, including Dr. Kalu, were rarely on duty during those hours. This revelation made Amina pause. If Dr. Kalu wasn't around during these shifts, how could he have been responsible? Something's not right, Amina said as she and Chika huddled over the files. They began cross-referencing the shifts with the patients who had fallen pregnant. A pattern emerged. Each of the women had been sedated at some point during their stay. Most of them received unusual strong doses of sleeping medication. But why? The further they dug, the more they realized that someone was manipulating the hospital system. The sleep medication records were another key piece of the puzzle. Each of the women had been administered sedatives at levels higher than what was necessary for their treatment. The medication logs showed a signature belonging to various staff members, but something was off. The signatures were all in different handwriting styles, suggesting forgery. The nurses brought their concerns to the head of the pharmacy department, but they were quickly dismissed. This is all circumstantial, they were told. Dr. Kalu is already under investigation. Frustrated and without institutional support, Amina and her team realized that they were on their own. They resolved to follow this trail of medication, determined to find out who was behind the falsified records. Meanwhile, Dr. Kalu's life continued to spiral downwards. He faced legal battles, public humiliation, and even death threats. Despite his pleas of innocence, few believed him. His family had abandoned him, and his closest colleagues refused to be seen with him. In his darkest moments, Dr. Kalu began to wonder if it was all his fault. Perhaps his flirtations had crossed a line he wasn't aware of. He racked his brain for any memory that might explain the accusations, but nothing made sense. Deep down, he knew he was being framed, but by whom and why? Late one night, Nurse Amina received an anonymous letter in her locker. The letter contained cryptic warnings about digging too deep into the pregnancy scandal.
If you keep looking, you'll regret it.
It said in jagged scrawled handwriting. The letter chilled Amina to her core, but she refused to back down. She shared it with Chika, who became more convinced that they were onto something dangerous. That same night, Nurse Tola, one of the first to speak out against Dr. Kalu, approached Amina in secret. "I need to tell you something," she whispered, her voice trembling. Tola had come forward with her accusations against Dr. Kalu, but now she admitted something else. "I don't know if he's really the one. I felt pressure to say it," Tola confessed. The hospital wanted someone to blame, and he was the easiest target. Amina was stunned. If Tola wasn't certain, then Dr. Kalu's case was even weaker than they thought. As General Okoye's campaign against Dr. Kalu reached its peak, something gnawed at him. His wife Amara had grown more distant each day, her coldness a reflection of the wedge between them. One evening, after another tense argument, Amara told him something that made his blood run cold. What if it wasn't Dr. Kalu? What if it was someone else? The general had been so focused on finding someone to punish that he had overlooked the possibility of being wrong. His pride had driven him, but now that pride was threatening to destroy his marriage. As much as it pained him to admit, Amara's words planted seeds of doubt. Could he have been wrong all along? He asked himself as he thought deeply, determined to prove once and for all what was really happening. Nurse Amina and Chika began tailing the night shift logs more closely. They monitored the staff rotations and double-checked which staff members were present during each of the patient's admissions and found something startling. Just as they stood there, the head doctor, Dr. Fakunle, walked up to them with a smile and asked them to go check on the patient. Their hearts raced as they quickly rushed to the wards to check on the patient. Nurse Amina and Nurse Chika knew that they had to be careful, knowing how dangerous it was to be investigating a case when they knew that the culprit was still on the loose. They ran into Nurse Ijoma, who was walking into the ward to check on the patient. She had a way of making the patients feel good about themselves, and everyone, including the other nurses in the hospital, envied and wanted to be like her. Nurse Amina and Nurse Chika quickly joined her as they checked on all the patients together. Just as they carried on their duties, the head doctor, Dr. Fakule, sent for Nurse Amina, who wondered why he wanted to see her. Her heart raced, knowing all the digging around that she had been doing and all the discoveries that she had made. As Nurse Amina walked down the corridor towards Dr. Fakule's office, her heart pounded with apprehension. She had been digging deeper into the Rosewood scandal for weeks, and the discovery of the altered patient's record had raised too many red flags. Was Dr. Fakule aware of her investigation? Was she in danger for pursuing the truth? When she entered his office, Dr. Fakule was sitting behind his desk, his expression unreadable. He gestured for her to take a seat, and as she sat down, trying to steady her nerves, "Amina," he began slowly, "I've heard you've been asking a lot of questions lately. Questions that are risky." Nurse Amina swallowed hard. "I just want to make sure the patients are safe, sir," she replied, carefully choosing her words. Dr. Fakule leaned forward, his eyes sharp. "You have to understand this hospital has a reputation to protect. The media has always painted us in a bad light because of Dr. Kalu's situation. We can't afford any more scandals. But sir, Amina said cautiously. There are inconsistencies in the records. Patients who were sedated at odd hours. Records that don't add up. I think there's more to this than Dr. Kalu. Dr. Fakule's expression darkened. Amina, I know you're good at your job, but sometimes it's better to leave things alone for your sake. The unspoken threat hung in the air, and Amina felt a chill run down her spine. She knew she had to tread carefully, but backing down now was not an option. As she left his office, she realized that the head doctor might be more involved than she had previously thought. Back in the wards, Nurse Chika was waiting anxiously for Amina. What did he say? She whispered. When Amina returned, he warned me off, Amina said quietly, but I think we are closer to the truth than we realize. Dr. Fakule knows something. We need to be careful. The two nurses decided to continue their investigation, but knew they had to move quickly before they were stopped. They worked late into the night, reviewing medication records, patient files, and night shift rotations. Finally, a pattern emerged, but they decided not to jump into conclusions, but rather find a way to catch the culprit red-handed. Meanwhile, Amara had reached her breaking point. The agony of watching a baby grow inside of her filled her with dread, especially when she had no idea how the baby got into her in the first place. She had waited 11 years to have a child, but the feeling of carrying this child seemed more like a curse to her than a blessing. Her husband was hell-bent on dealing with Dr. Kalu, but Amara had a strange feeling that the doctor was innocent. Amara could not bear the growing tension any longer. Every day, she felt the baby's movements within her, yet her heart rejected the joy most expectant mothers would feel. The shame of the unknown haunted her, and she began doubting everything she once knew. As her husband, General Okoye, continued his crusade against Dr. Kalu, she grew more certain that the real culprit was yet to be found. One evening, Amara decided to take matters into her own hands. She had heard whispers from one of her friends, a fellow patient at Rosewood, who shared similar concerns. Together, they agreed that something deeper was happening at the hospital. They needed answers. With some hesitation, Amara reached out to Nurse Amina, who she had heard was investigating the mystery quietly. Amina, though startled by the unexpected call from Amara, agreed to meet her in secret. They met in a small cafe on the outskirts of the city, where Amara shared her fears and suspicions. I don't believe it was Dr. Kalu, she said, her voice shaking. There's something darker happening in that hospital. I can feel it. Amina listened carefully. She knew Amara's words carried weight, especially since the general had been spearheading the smear campaign against Dr. Kalu. If Amara was now doubting her husband's conclusions, there might be more at stake than she even realized. Thank you for coming forward, Mrs. Okoye, Amina replied. We've uncovered some suspicious activity in the hospital, and your testimony might be the missing piece we need. They exchanged information, and Amina promised to continue digging. As Amara left, a flicker of hope began to spark within her, a hope that the truth would finally come to light. Months passed, and the legal battle with Dr. Kalu continued. The court of public opinion had already pronounced him guilty, calling that his head be put on a spike. Within a twinkle of an eye, Dr. Kalu lost all that he had worked for over 30 years. Nurse Amina and Nurse Chika grew increasingly worried, knowing that Dr. Kalu was innocent of the crime being levied against him. Just when all seemed lost, a young boy and his mother walked up to Amina to reveal what he saw on one fateful night. This was a few weeks ago, when his mother was admitted in the hospital. The young boy left his mother's hospital ward and was loitering around the hospital when he saw something that shocked him to the bones. He caught the culprit defiling a female patient that seemed to be unconscious. The young boy then handed Nurse Amina a wristwatch belonging to the culprit that he picked up. His mother caught him with the wristwatch a few weeks later, but he was too afraid to tell her what he saw. Nurse Amina felt her heart skip a bit as she stared at the wristwatch in her hand, her mind racing. This was it, the break that they had been waiting for. She then asked the boy to describe who he saw that night, and the boy informed her that it was a woman, a nurse in her nurse uniform. Nurse Amina stood there confused. How can a nurse be the culprit? She asked herself as she began to doubt the little boy's testimony. Nurse Amina's confusion deepened as she processed the boy's words. A nurse? It didn't add up. Could a nurse really be responsible for something so sinister? She knew that she had to tread carefully. The boy was young, and while his account was compelling, it was possible that he had misunderstood what he saw. But the wristwatch, a tangible piece of evidence, was still in her hand, and it was the clue that could unravel everything for her. Deciding to verify the boy's claim, Amina discreetly started checking the staff records from the night the boy described. She needed to know which nurses were on duty that evening, and what she saw shocked her to the bones. It can't be, Nurse Amina said to herself as she took a second glance at the wristwatch and shone her eyes in shock. She could not believe what she was seeing. The initials at the back of the watch pointed at one nurse, a nurse she had never imagined could do something like this. Just as she stood there shocked, Nurse Ijoma, the most loved nurse in the hospital, walked past her, smiling as she passed, and Nurse Amina quickly hid the watch. Nurse Amina's heart pounded in her chest. The initials engraved on the back of the watch were unmistakable, but Nurse Amina had to be sure because of the seriousness of the accusation. I have to use this watch as a bait, Nurse Amina thought to herself as she kept the watch in a place where the culprit would definitely find it. Nurse Chika, in that moment, rushed into the staff room with a file in her hand. I found this in Nurse Ijoma's bag, she said, revealing that Nurse Ijoma was the culprit that they were looking for. Nurse Chika said as her heart raced in her chest. Nurse Amina could not believe her eyes. The records showed that Nurse Ijoma was on duty on the days that all the victims were admitted. They both sat down on a chair close to Nurse Chika's desk as Nurse Amina continued to go through the documents, shocked at what she was seeing. In that moment, Nurse Chika caught sight of the watch. She picked it up, smiling happily as she asked who left the watch on her table. Who left this here? She asked Nurse Amina, who could see how excited she was to see her watch. Nurse Amina in that moment knew that Nurse Chika, the nurse who had been helping her investigate the case for all these months, was the culprit she had been looking for. Is that your watch? Nurse Amina asked Nurse Chika, who shook her head with a smile on her face, not knowing that it was a trap. So, you are the one I've been looking for. Nurse Amina confronted Nurse Chika, whose face changed in that instant moment. I kept the watch on your table as a bait to know if truly you were the one responsible for all that was happening. Nurse Chika could not believe what she was hearing. Nurse Amina then went on to narrate how the little boy caught her in a patient's ward one night, defiling a sedated patient. Who are you? Nurse Amina asked Nurse Chika, whose wicked laugh echoed through the staff room, sending a chill down Nurse Amina's spine. The transformation in Chika's demeanor was startling. Her once kind and helpful nature evaporated in an instant, replaced by a twisted malicious smirk. You think you're better than me, don't you? Nurse Chika spat, her voice dripping with venom. All of you women, walking around with your perfect bodies, your perfect lives, and you never once stopped to think what it's like to be born different. Nurse Amina's heart raced as she listened, her mind grappling with the gravity of the confession she was about to hear. I was born with both male and female organs, Chika began, her voice steady but laced with bitterness. A hermaphrodite. My parents were ashamed of me. They never told anyone, and I grew up in secrecy, pretending to be something I wasn't. Do you know what it's like to live like that? To hate what you are? Nurse Amina remained silent, too shocked to speak, but her eyes were locked on Chika as the truth spilled out. I tried to live normally. Chika continued, pacing the room like a caged animal. But every time I saw a woman with her perfect life, her perfect body, it reminded me of what I could never have. I could never have children. I could never be fully a woman or a man. So, I decided to take control of what I could. Amina felt the pieces of the puzzle falling into place, and a sickening realization washed over her. That's why you violated those women? Amina asked, her voice barely a whisper. Chika nodded slowly, a chilling grin creeping across her face. Yes, it was my way of taking power back. I chose those women because they were vulnerable, just like me once. But unlike me, they didn't have to suffer, so I made them suffer. Tears welled up in Amina's eyes as she thought of the innocent women who had been violated, their lives torn apart by Chika's monstrous actions. But Amina had to stay strong. She needed to get a full confession. Why did you frame Dr. Kalu? Amina asked, her voice trembling. Why him? Chika's smile widened. Because it was easy. He was already a flirt. No one would think twice if he were accused of something inappropriate. It was the perfect cover, and I was right, wasn't I? The whole hospital turned against him in an instant. Amina clenched her fist, fury and disgust welling up inside of her. The lengths Chika had gone to, in her sick, twisted revenge, were unfathomable. All this time, all this destruction, because you hated what you were? Amina asked, her voice crackling with emotion. Chika's face darkened. Because I hated what you all represented. You had what I could never have, so I took it away. As Chika's words lingered in the air, Nurse Amina knew that she had to act fast. The weight of the revelation was suffocating, but she couldn't let Chika get away with it. Slowly, she reached for her phone, pretending to adjust her uniform. You think you've won, don't you, Amina? Chika sneered, sensing her movement. But it's too late. No one will believe you over me. I've been the perfect nurse. I've helped you every step of the way. You have no real proof, only your suspicions. Amina met Chika's gaze, a steely determination in her eyes. I have all I need, Chika. You just confessed everything. With that, Amina pressed send on her phone, signaling the hospital security team that had been listening in through a hidden recording device. Within moments, the door burst open and two security officers stormed in, apprehending Chika before she could react. You set me up, Chika shrieked, struggling against the officers as they restrained her. You will regret this, Amina. You all will regret this. But Amina didn't flinch. She stood tall, watching as Chika was led away in handcuffs, her reign of terror finally over. The truth had come to light. Nurse Chika, a woman, tortured by her own body and consumed by hatred, was the one responsible for the pregnancy scandal that had nearly destroyed the lives of so many innocent women. As Nurse Amina stood there, shaking, she knew that the scars of the dark chapter in Rosewood Hospital's history would linger for a very long time. As the truth came to light, Dr. Kalu was exonerated, his name cleared of all wrongdoing. Though his reputation had been severely damaged, he was relieved to finally be free of the accusations that had nearly destroyed his life. General Okoye, deeply remorseful for accusing Dr. Kalu wrongfully, publicly apologized for his wrongs. His wife Amara wept on hearing all that had happened. She was haunted by the thought of carrying a child conceived through such a horrific violation. The revelation that Nurse Chika, consumed by her inner torment, had been responsible for the assault left Amara and her husband with a difficult decision to make regarding the unborn child. General Okoye was torn. His military training had taught him to seek justice at all costs, and while he had pursued Dr. Kalu with ruthless determination, the truth of Nurse Chika's actions had brought him to a crossroad. How could he love a child conceived in such a horrifying way? Yet, at the same time, He could not bring himself to advocate for ending the pregnancy. The baby was innocent, a victim of Chika's cruelty just like his wife. Amara was equally conflicted. For years, she had longed for a child, and now, after 11 years of waiting, she was pregnant. But the circumstances of the pregnancy filled her with dread. Every kick, every movement of the baby inside of her reminded her of the violation she had endured. She didn't know if she could raise this child without being haunted by the way it had come into existence. The couple sought counsel from their closest friends and a trusted family pastor who urged them to think carefully about their decision. The pastor reminded them that the child had no part in Chika's crimes and that life, no matter how it began, was a gift. He encouraged them to consider forgiveness, both for themselves and for the innocent life growing inside of Amara. After many sleepless nights and long emotional conversations, Amara and the general finally made their decision. They would keep the baby, but it would not be easy. They decided to relocate from the city, leaving behind the scandal and media attention that had plagued them for months. They needed a fresh start, away from the whispers and judgmental stares. In their new home, far from Rosewood Hospital and the painful memories associated with it, Amara gave birth to a healthy baby boy. Despite the emotional challenges, the moment she held him in her arms, something inside her shifted. She saw not the product of violation, but a life deserving of love and care. The baby was innocent, and in his wide bright eyes, she found a glimmer of hope. For General Okoye, the journey was more difficult. He struggled to bond with the child at first, the weight of the scandal and the betrayal by those he trusted hanging over him. But as time passed, he too began to see the boy as his own, a symbol of resilience in the face of unspeakable circumstances. Together, they named him Emmanuel, meaning God is with us, a testament to the strength and faith that had carried them through the darkest period of their lives. In Emmanuel, they found a new purpose, a chance to heal, to move forward and to rebuild their family. Though the scars of what had happened at Rosewood would never fully fade, the Okoyes learned to live with them. Their story became one of redemption and resilience, a testament to the power of love and forgiveness, even in the face of unimaginable pain. The lesson to be learned from this story is that we should always be wary of our actions and reputation, as this is like a scent that follows us wherever we go. Always strive to live right, as this will save you from unwanted problems in life. It is also important to seek the truth and avoid accusing a person falsely, because false accusations can cause irreparable damage to the life of a person. That is why the Bible teaches us not to bear false witness against our neighbors. Also, the story teaches us the importance of seeking for repentance when one is wrong, and also the importance of forgiving others when they wrong us. Always remember that holding on to bitterness or anger can only perpetuate pain, whilst forgiveness promotes healing and growth. Be kind to one another, tender-hearted, forgiving one another as God in Christ forgave us. Last but not least, always remember that every life is precious, regardless of the circumstances of its conception. I hope you enjoyed the story.